Good afternoon, everyone. It's 12:30. We're letting people in. I think we'll probably wait one more minute just so we don't have to start over. So hang tight and we'll start momentarily. And actually, I do see one person who has called in. Can whoever has called in let us know who they are? That would be
James
awesome.
Root, Danbury.
Hey.
Hi, James. Thanks for coming in.
No problem.
All right, hold tight. And Shira, are you planning to share the presentation or is?
Yep.
Okay.
I can do it whenever we're good to go.
Maybe you can put the cover slide up.
Sure. Let me know if you can see it.
Yeah, we can see it. It's just, yeah, now it's in presentation. Well, we do, yeah, it's perfect now. All right, we still have a couple of people coming in, so please be patient. All right, is everyone okay if we get started? Shira?
Yeah.
Okay, Krishaline, perfect. All
Yep.
right. Hello, everyone. My name is Marcy Miller, and thank you for attending our 14th PAC meeting. I can't believe we've come this far. This is gonna be like most of our virtual meetings where I start off, I'll go through a very short housekeeping list. I think we all know how to use Teams and how we do these meetings. And then we'll have our presenters, and then we'll open it up for discussion at various points. So just so you all know, I want to let you know the meeting is recorded today, and we will post the recording on the website once that is cleaned up a little bit. Right now, the presentation is also on the website. So if you are calling in, I know James is, you can follow along by looking on the website. You know, there's two ways to get in: video conference and phone. And we have two main ways to communicate. One, you can raise your hand verbally and we'll call on you if you have a question throughout the presentation, or you can type it into the chat and with that, we'll read it aloud and someone from the study team will answer it. We have multiple people from the study team here to answer your questions. From the department, we have Neil Patel, our principal engineer, Kevin Burnham, our project manager, and Krishaline Macrahan, who you will hear from momentarily. And from the consulting team, we have Sharat Kaluri, Janine Armstrong-Gowan, Rick Black, and me, who is doing the introduction and will help lead the discussion. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Krishaline, who can present the agenda.
Okay. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us again. I see a lot of people joining us today. I appreciate that. So for today's meeting, we will always start with the PAC update. Then the meat of this presentation will talk about the potential early action or breakout projects. Then we will end this presentation with next steps before we open the floor for discussions and questions. Next slide, please. For PAC update. Yep. Line. Okay, so since our last meeting, PAC 13, we identified the reasonable range of alternatives. So how we got there is part of the PEL study. So the project team started with a total of 26 concepts. And all these 26 concepts are available on our project website. So I encourage everyone in this call to visit them if you have not. So from 26 concepts, they all went through multi-level screening. So the first part is we screen all 26 concepts by their segment. With that 26, it turned out to be 8 concepts and 2 concepts that are recommended for breakout projects. Then those 8 concepts we combine them to form 12 concept combinations. Then that 12 concept combinations went another screening, which we call the screening of concept combination. And with that, it resulted to 3 concept combinations, which is the reasonable range of alternatives that will be evaluated in NEPA analysis. So all this process that I give you is documented in Pell report that is currently drafted by the project team. So while we're drafting the Pell report, the project team is also reviewing the potential breakout projects, which you are going to be hearing some of them in the next presentations. And lastly, with regards to our social media, we are still active, and please follow us on our social media accounts, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, and no longer Twitter, but yeah. And with that, I am handing in the presentation to Sharat.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Krishaleen.
You're welcome.
So as Krishaleen said, in the last PAC meeting, we covered the reasonable range of alternates. As you've seen on the website, there were 26 concepts that went through a screening process. We came out with 8 concepts that moved forward. And as Krishaleen said, two of the concepts were taken out into an early action / breakout projects. And the rest of them got combined to form the larger core alternates, and that was part of the reasonable range of alternatives. So today we're not discussing those. They were covered in the last PAC meeting. We are going to focus today on those early action breakout projects that kind of popped out. And one of them, the first one we're going to talk about is the what's called the TISMO, or Transportation Systems Management and Operations. I'll kind of briefly touch upon what that means. One of the strategies that came out of the TISMO package was the dynamic lane use, and I'll cover what the dynamic lane use means. I think some of you or most of you have seen some of this presentation in the past PAC meetings, but thought it'll be a good thing to reiterate. And the department is really pushing forward to look at the feasibility and move this specific initiative forward. There were 2 other projects that came out as part of our study, as part of our planning process. One is the intersection of Main Street and Down Street at Interchange 5. As you get off the highway going eastbound, you enter this intersection of Main and Downs and North Street. That has been a subject of conversation. We've had conversations with the city. We went through a more robust, detailed analysis of the intersection to identify the concerns and the needs of that intersection, and are starting to evaluate potential concepts. We have some thoughts in mind, but just wanted to mention that work is ongoing. The other project, which is the Interchange 8 improvements, is more related to the US Route 6 Newtown Road area. Many of you have gone through that area, which is kind of circuitous for a lot of folks to turn around Newtown Road to Route 6 and back to westbound ramps or the opposite way. The last 2 projects are deemed to be independent utility. What that means is that these projects could be done in advance, irrespective of whatever happens on the highway, because these could be some quick projects that the department could look in more detail and implement at a faster pace. So let's talk about the first one, which is the TISMO dynamic lane use. What is TISMO? So TISMO is an initiative by Federal Highway Administration. This basically looks at maximizing the use of existing and planned transportation infrastructure. So it doesn't have to be roadways. It's transit. It could be multimodal rail. It could be active transportation, which is ped and bike. It could be also other types of technology. It could be freight related. The beauty of the TISMO is done fairly. It could be done fairly quickly. It maximizes the use of the existing highway. A lot of the work in TISMO is done within the existing footprint of the highway and does not require any additional right of way. So in terms of implementation, this is a pretty quick implementation timeframe turnaround. So when I say quick, it's usually much quicker than a larger project would happen. So keeping that in mind. So dynamic lane use, there's about, I would say about 50 or so, 45, 50 strategies that are part of the TISMO package. Dynamic lane use is one of them, which we'll get into a little bit more detail. The whole basic idea of the dynamic lane use is that you're allowed to open or close a travel lane on the highway based on traffic conditions. So I go back to times when we were on the Tappan Zee Bridge, and some of you have traveled there, where there's lane use arrows on top of the Tappan Zee Bridge that people adhere to depending on time of day those lanes are being used or not used. There are other states like Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and other states down south are also using dynamic lane use in different ways. We'll talk about the Michigan example in this presentation, but just keeping in mind that these travel lanes are open depending on traffic conditions. So it could be incidents, it could be other types of special events. So it's a strategy that you that's available to implement when there's a need to open that travel lane. So where we are looking at dynamic lane use, so the extent. If someone can mute their phone, I think we're getting an echo. Thank you. So the extent of the dynamic lane use is we went through a lot of evaluation trying to look at the roadway geometry and conditions and the existing bridges that are along this corridor. The general area that we're looking to start is just east of Lake Avenue, going eastbound to just around the Route 7 interchange on the east side. So the limits are somewhere just east of Lake Avenue to Route 7. So the exact limits have not been defined. That requires a little bit more engineering and design, but just that's the general extent. Coming in westbound would be somewhere where the 7 on comes on, and the place where the 7 splits to the left-hand exit. And I have a little bit more detailed plans later on, but just it's about a 3.5 to 4 mile stretch of 84 that we're looking at, and this is the area where the need is in those commuter peak periods. That's in the morning going into New York, and the afternoon coming from New York, and that's kind of where the idea of the dynamic lane use came into study. So general concept, this is a graphic that kind of illustrates. So this is again kind of taking a piece of 84. And this is not exactly how it's going to be done. This is just to show us concept of how it operates. So if you see this, the dynamic lane use in this case that we are looking at, right, just for everyone's benefit, is being looked at as the use of the left side shoulder. So there's an existing median, as you all know, there's lighting on the median. The dynamic lane would be on the left side, so it'll be on the shoulder of the left side. So the lane use signs here are indicative of what lanes are open. Like here shows 3 lanes are open. I mean, you can see the traffic is generally seems to be pretty free flowing. That's why the dynamic lane use is closed. So since there's no need to open that because the traffic seems pretty good, the lane is closed. But then as the traffic builds up, and this is a situation in the morning rush hour if you're going towards New York, same in the afternoon rush hour coming from New York, now suddenly it warrants the need to open up that lane. And that's kind of when it would trigger it. So there's going to be these triggers or strategies that are going to be looked at, and when the lane should be open, when the lane should be closed. And it's generally speaking, the commuter peak periods we know is where the need is in the morning and the afternoon. But there could be other events. And as you'll see in the Michigan example, they've been using it for different situations. The lane could be opened or closed for any special events, or if any kind of an incident happens where the right lane is closed, for example, the dynamic lane could be opened up to shift traffic over to that shoulder area. So here's an example of how Michigan uses it. It's called the flex lane in Michigan, kind of very similar. Kind of looking at this, they have 2 mainline lanes. So they have 2 lanes on the highway versus we have 3. And this is kind of where the shoulder area is. And here it shows they kind of use one sign. They've used one sign to say this lane is open now, can be used. In addition, there are a few other things to note here. There's a speed limit sign on the top. So what this is, what it's called, it's another form of a TISMO strategy where it's called variable speed. So this variable speed messaging allows the the highway to be operated at a speed lower than the posted speed limit. So you have posted speed limit signs on the roadway. So they're usually posted at 65 miles an hour, in some cases 55 miles an hour. This speed limit sign allows to enforce a different speed depending on the travel conditions. So here the variable message sign shows that this piece of the highway is now at 60 miles an hour. Also, there's an additional sign which is called a variable message sign, and many of you have seen this across the highways along most of the highways in Connecticut. And basically it's additional messaging for the motorists to say the left shoulder is now open for traffic. So it's kind of gives two different indications. One is showing that the lane is open with the green arrow, and then also a sign that says left shoulder open to traffic, in addition to designating a speed. So this speed of 60 miles an hour is enforced across all lanes of traffic. In a second scenario, it's possible there's congestion downstream, so speed is continuously monitored, and the speed could be changed to a lower limit than the 60, which allows people to recognize that there could be an incident ahead, that people need to slow down. So this type of technology helps the overall operation of the corridor. So essentially, it's a management strategy on how the corridor is operated and how this lane can be opened or closed depending on conditions down. So here's an example of when the lane is closed. You see this is kind of a blank out sign. So essentially what this means is the variable speed messaging is no longer inactive. So whatever the speed limit is on the highway, which is posted on those signs on the right side, are in effect. And this is additional signage that says left shoulder closed to traffic. So there's a lot of, as you see from these slides, there's a lot of technology that's being built in to inform the motorists about conditions downstream of where they're going to, and also just in advance so they don't react to a situation that happens there. The other types of indication is like this is a situation where a lane is closed. So the right lane is closed. There's this message sign is showing that traffic should merge. So this lane is now open because this lane is closed, and then shows that incident ahead. So with these signs that are up on the gantry, it allows motorists to be informed of the conditions and allows them to change. And then the more importantly, the use of that lane becomes active, whether the need is there at that time. So here's a more detailed view of generally showing where the DLU use is going to be looked at as part of the I-84 project. So this is the Lake Avenue section, just east of the Lake Avenue. This is the overpass over Lake Avenue. So we are looking to kind of start it somewhere where that off ramp comes off to Lake Avenue, and you can kind of see this green lane here. That is essentially a shorter lane. So there's going to be about a 2-foot right now based on the plan. We are looking at keeping the existing 58-foot wide section from the median all the way to the edge of the shoulder line. So that's the total width that's available from the median to the edge of the shoulder. In that 58 feet, we're going to have 2 feet of a shoulder on the left side, a 11-foot Dan McLean use, a 12-foot, 2 travel lanes that are 12-foot wide, then 11-foot right travel lane, and then 10-foot shoulder. So if you add all of those, you get 58. So the idea is to get that traffic on the left side. One of the things that I'll talk about later is the presence of these left-hand exits. So that's going to be something that needs to be looked at more in design. But the idea is to get the traffic on this shoulder, and this is representing a condition where we would do it in the evening, for example, going eastbound, is to get that traffic into that left shoulder to allow them to travel and use that lane to go east during the evening, and the same applies to the west in the morning. So here it shows the transition, how the westbound 84 3 lanes would come in, and the transition right now is fairly smooth, and I'm going to zoom in a bit. Allows to transition easily into the 2 left-hand lanes. There's going to be some additional signage in advance for those people to get out of the leftmost lane if they're traveling to 84 if they, for some reason, they're are stuck in that leftmost lane, to direct them to move over to 84. So that those details will be worked out as this project progresses into design. But the idea is to use this additional capacity or the additional shoulder space for travel during those peak periods and other periods when it's needed. In the east side, similar idea as the west. In the eastbound direction, it would basically terminate similar to the west into that Route 7 off ramp. So one of the things that's not being done as part of this project, and that's going to be a much larger initiative to undertake, is the switching of the left-hand ramps on Route 7 to the right side. Those ramps are not going to be switched as part of this project. They'll remain the left, and that's why those transitions are critical in terms of how traffic is directed to move out of those lanes. In the east side, in going west, so as you're coming from Route 7, this area is going to be opened up to 2 lanes. We've heard this comment come from several folks about this Federal Road on-ramp coming and this Route 7 South coming, and merging into a single lane before the merge in. So the idea is to keep that as a 2-lane on-ramp and merge that in as a 2-lane on-ramp. So here at some point you will have, for a short section, you'll have 4 lanes, and then that 4th lane would transition into the DLU lane. So that's again a detail that we have to work out over here. But the idea is to try to maintain that continuity with the 4 lanes coming in where Route 7 merges in, and transition that to the dynamic lane where it will still remain those 4 lanes, so we don't lose that capacity as the transition happens. So those are, generally speaking, the west end and the east end concepts. In between, what will happen is essentially the area would be pretty similar to what you see here. It'd be 3 travel lanes, a shoulder on the right side on both sides, and the left shoulder, which is going to be about 13 feet wide when it's not used as a dynamic lane. But when it's used as a dynamic lane, the shoulder would be only 2 feet and 11-foot travel lane for the dynamic lane use. So here's the perspective we created. One of the things, as I said, is going to be a detail that we need to work out is the Route 7 ramps being on the right side. So this is, on the left side. This is as you're going westbound on 84. So as you're approaching that exit 3 area, certainly the signage has to be looked at in terms of how traffic has to be shifted over if people want to go to 84 West, and then people who are going towards Route 7 can stay on that leftmost lane, which will transition to that exit lane as I showed you in the previous plan. So that's something that to keep in mind, and wanted to show the group here that that's something that has to be worked out, just for the fact that the 7 ramps are on the left side. So some of the benefits, we may have mentioned this when we presented this this concept or the specific strategy within the concept. The peak hour delay is reduced. Granted that some of the speeds are going to be not as you would expect on a regular travel lane, because we are looking at providing a 2-foot shoulder with 11-foot travel lane that's still constrained. We do see capacity benefits because it does provide some additional lanes. Many of those states we have spoken to have seen safety benefits. Essentially, it controls speed, and that variable speed sign I mentioned is a way of maintaining a certain speed throughout the corridor and being able to control the flow of traffic in that corridor. It can be constructed within existing right of way, and that's kind of what we're seeing in our project. We're going to be constructing within the existing pavement, looking to construct within the existing pavement width. The impacts are minimal, so we're not looking to work on any of the structures as part of this initiative. A lot of that, those structures are going to be kept in place. There'll be some work that may be done on the median side, which the department is still looking at, the versus to keep the median, or looking to replace the median. So there's very limited impacts on related to the footprint or the width of the highway. Everything is going to be worked in within the existing footprint, and the implementation is in a short time frame, and we'll talk about that a little bit later about this specific project. Coming to here, so we have had conversations with the different groups. We coordinate with Federal Highway. We have also met and we actually had meetings with the state of Michigan and Wisconsin just to kind of understand their process and how they're using the dynamic lane use. A future coordination is going to be with emergency services and other stakeholders, including the city and the communities. So there's going to be a lot of public outreach we see to push this concept, the idea of this concept through. We are currently working on doing some feasibility analysis, I said. The environmental review and design should shortly be commencing this year. The anticipated construction completion is 27, 28. So this is about a 5-year cycle to design and implement, roughly. Any questions on the DLU?
Hi, Sharat.
Yeah.
There is one question in the chat from Barry.
Okay.
And it basically says, question on the DLU on I-84 west by exit 7. Right now, there's no actual merge from Route 7. With 4 lanes, there still won't be, but will people realize there is no merge? I thought that there must be, is what slows down traffic as far back as exit 11 during rush hour.
Yeah, Barry. So to that point, on the east end, there's a merge from Route 7 from 2 down to 1. The plan here is to open that merge out to full 2 lanes. And as those 2 lanes come on to 84 West, it'll be 4 lanes on 84, 2 coming from 84 westbound and 2 coming from 7. And then there'll be a changeover where we have to bring that merge, the second lane of 7 down, and people have to move over almost. And that whole shifting has to be designed and looked at more closely, but that dynamic lane use is intended to open up as the 4th lane, right, as the transition happens on that second lane coming in. So it's not a perfect 2 lanes.
I don't think that's
Yeah.
good enough. I don't think that's good enough, because while there is a merge of 2 lanes to 1 on Route 7, there is not a merge from 84 where that Route 7 interchange is, and yet it still backs up to exit 11. And so all I think this is going to do is confuse people even more, and the backup is going to get worse, not better. At least you're asking those of us who drive these highways every day, and I go home that way every day.
Mhm.
I don't think this is a solution.
Hi, may I comment? My name's Scott Dale. I'm from Brookfield as well. The backup actually begins earlier than what you have there on the map. It actually begins on the ramp prior to that. It would be to the right of that.
The white
That's
turkey
where it
one?
begins.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. This does not address that at all. If you're fortunate to get through that filter beforehand, then perhaps it might help you at that point. But the source of the problem, though, is to the right of where that map is.
So Scott, I mean, one of the things that you're pointing out there is, will that be an area where we look at 2 lanes over there and then a 1
Yeah.
merge coming from Federal and then continuing the 2 lanes with that? So that was something we had looked at initially too, as
Mhm.
well, to take that as 2 lanes coming on from 7 and 1
It-
from Federal merging in.
It-
But it
My
has to
hope
be
was
2 lanes
that
up here.
I think with the dynamic lane topic was that somehow would incorporate some pieces of the concept 10, which I believe did address what I'm speaking to.
Okay. We could look at that. I mean, that's something that is, so the point is here, we have to come back to 2 lanes, which could be done.
Yeah.
I think concept 10, what you're referring to, did the same thing with the
Mhm.
2 lanes coming on. But I think the way we're showing it here is with the Federal Road coming on and a single lane on 7 coming on. Concept 10 had 2 lanes of 7 coming on and 1
Correct.
lane of Federal Road merging. So the point is, the constraint point area is this merge area, which we are keeping as 4 lanes with the 2 and the 2.
It- That could be helpful, but yeah, it still does not address the core of the issue.
Yeah, so that's something we can look at. Here we are kind of the reason we have to bring this back sooner to merge it in is because of looking at the structure here. We wanted to get the dynamic lane use open to allow for that swap. Now we are looking at this starting point of where this would start. That is still in decision making and feasibility of it. The idea is to allow that additional capacity to be available in this section where 7 comes on and the DLU starts. So again, those are details that we'll have to work it out as we develop design.
All right,
And
so
also to Barry's point, there's going to be a lot of public outreach and discussion on that specific topic. So, it's not like this is moving forward and the department understands that. So just to your point, Barry.
all right, so I want to just back up a little bit. I know Scott, you did raise your hand and you chimed in as well. Did you have an additional question before we move on, or did you state
That
your
was it.
piece?
Thank you.
Okay, and then now I have John with your hand raised as well.
Yeah, the overall concept of the dynamic lane use is incorporated when the road is fairly straight and the inclines are minimal.
Mhm.
You have a big problem in that whole section there in both directions because you have a severe curve coming from 3 into exit 4 going eastbound. And you also have a curve coming from as you come from exit 9 towards exit 8, you have a severe curve where you don't see traffic. And then you have the incline as you go up to exit 6 going westbound. I mean, if you don't fix that, the dynamic lane use is only going to be minimal, have a minimal effect on the traffic flow during peak times and even off peak. This stuff backs up on Sundays.
Yep.
In both directions. So until you fix those hills and curves, this is just a minimal impact on the traffic in this region. And I said that from the beginning. I said that at the last meeting, and the comment was, well, we've taken that position and we're not going to adjust the road in any way, shape, or form. So the whole concept here is, to me, is going to be useless. So right now I'm along for the ride. So that's my comment.
I agree with John too at that, with that point. I mean, the grade of the highway itself is going to cause issues with this dynamic lane usage, mainly because the way people drive in this part of the country, it's not really in John's words, a flat highway mindset. People are used to curves, and so they kind of drive more defensively because of that. It's a more aggressive manner. When you don't have that line of sight, you're not going to have that level of safety that should be expected from a highway that handles this much capacity and also has as much commercial traffic, which is another concern. Obviously, the lanes are specific widths, but how is this going to affect commercial traffic? Or are they going to be allowed in these exterior lanes, the far left and the far right lanes? I know that they, at their core, I think have the same width, but is this going to be allowed? How is this going to affect the road? And is this going to affect traffic? Because they themselves also limit visibility and are slower and have their own, restrictions when driving. So either way, these are all things that I've been thinking about as well. And I totally agree with John. I think this is going to be a major concern. And I don't think that this dynamic lane usage is actually going to solve anything.
So in terms of the commercial traffic on the dynamic lane use, which I can answer, is they're not going to be allowed on the dynamic lane use. That's going to be a restriction of the dynamic lane use to use the commercial traffic.
So, Sharad, sorry to cut you off with that too. I just wanted to point this out too. How is that going to be enforced? Because we don't have the state police presence to enforce that. We also don't have people that actually listen to rules around here. There needs to be some level of restriction where they're either completely blocked off or you're just going to allow them because you just have to assume that truck drivers, regardless of who they are inherently going to break the rules because they're overworked, underpaid, and completely underregulated. So let's just completely get rid of that stigma right there. They're not going to listen to the rules that are set out. Most will,
Right.
but the 1 or 2 truck drivers that don't could potentially kill people. And that's going to create, like I said, less safety than what we already have now.
And that's an excellent point, Chris. I mean, so that is something that has to be the next step for us is so this concept is still being discussed internally, and the next step, as I said, is and the department's looking to go through all the issues that you and John mentioned are some of the issues that we are going through right now to look at sight lines, look at coordination with stakeholders, and we've had conversations with other states who have done similar types of uses.
That's part of the process, right? And a lot of these concerns, we've got some internal folks in our highway operation and maintenance that have concerns, and in talking to the other states, the same types of questions and concerns came up, and they went through a process. The educational component of this is going to be pretty extensive to make sure everyone understands how it operates. But yeah, enforcement is going to be a key part of it. In talking to some of these other states, they had dedicated patrol service within this area. Is that something that Connecticut will do? We don't know, but those are the discussions that we have to have in order for this to be implemented. So yeah, we're still early on, in terms of the concept here, but we've got some work to do to make sure that what is being proposed is still going to be a safe and efficient, and it is going to address some of the capacity concerns that we had in here during the peak hours. Again, the intent also is not to try and provide that free flow condition. Really, we're trying to address those congested periods. Obviously, all of in terms of the bottlenecks that are in here and within this corridor. And so, as Sharat mentioned, you may get a condition where with the dynamic lane being open, and you may still have a speed restriction. But again, at least you're improving the condition as it is today, and what we're projecting to see in the future.
All right, thanks, Neil. Are there any other comments or questions on the dynamic lane use for the team?
I actually have just one more question regarding the entire, I guess you can say, organization of the corridor. So if these things are enacted, like the dynamic lane usage, for example, is there going to be any type of technology that's utilized to make sure that people follow these speed restrictions or don't go in these lanes? Because that's the only way I could potentially see this being enforced, in a way that actually will make traffic flow better. Because again, same thing with the speed restrictions. How are we going to enforce that? I think that when there's open road, people are going to go as fast as they possibly can go around here. I mean, within a restriction up to maybe 80 miles an hour. But if you expect people to go 45 or 50 and they're booking 80 in one lane, and then they're, slowing down to maybe 45 in the other because that's the speed restriction, and then going 20 in another lane because they're getting off of an exit, that's going to create more safety hazards than if there was just regular traffic where all lanes were stopped.
Yeah, those are good points, Chris. I mean, those are all things that has to be, we have to figure that out. I mean, those are part of the planning of this whole process, and we have to meet with the stakeholders, meet with you guys, the community in Danbury, and there's a process that has to be, talking to state police, DOT maintenance, as we've started to have those conversations with DOT maintenance. There's a concern of debris on the road, on those shoulders. There's a concern of, other kinds of things that might have to be addressed that may come up like what we heard from other states. So those are things that we have to put in some sort of a document to understand how and when this dynamic lane use is going to be operated. So this is, again, we are at the very early level of planning in this to understand all the different opportunities we have to implement something that could potentially help those peak period congestion, and not have to look for that final project down the road, which is several years away potentially, to kind of look at something that could be done. And and we are not the first state that's doing it. Several other states have done it and have similar types of conditions out there. So we just want to explore that and see what are things
Right.
that can be put forward.
Sure, but in terms of technology, I would say like, yeah, the corridor will be implementing the incident management cameras, right? So we'll have full
Yep.
coverage within this corridor. So yeah, if you have a breakdown, our highway operations would be notified and they can close the lane if that were the case. So there will be technology that's incorporated into this concept. When you talk about enforcement, well, that's another whole nother discussion, especially with with legislative actions in terms of how you can do enforcement outside the traditional methods.
All right, so I want to confirm, that was James, that was you that just spoke up, correct?
I have not spoken.
Okay,
That was
so
Chris, I think.
oh, that was
Chris.
Chris. Okay, I was trying to take
Yeah,
notes. I missed that.
You know,
Thank you.
my apologies. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm on like my phone, and then also I'm on
Okay.
the computer.
Perfect. Oh, thank you. I'm glad, Shrat, you caught that because it made me think twice. All right.
No worries.
So, other questions or comments for the team? I know they've been kind of trickling in, but this is good discussion and, it gives us a few things to look back on.
Okay. So move on to the Main Street, North Street, and Down Street intersection. So I think we've talked about this as well in previous meetings. We had, as I said, we had done a more detailed analysis of the Main Street, Down Street intersection than what we had done as part of the needs and deficiencies work. That's part of this project. So this intersection has been a concern. It's kind of the centerpiece of the downtown gateway, if I would call it. So traffic operations is a huge concern here. The conditions during peak periods at this intersection, especially gridlocks during the peak periods with poor levels of service and queuing at these intersections, at all these approaches. There's a sightline concern as you're coming down Main Street, looking through this overpass and looking at the signal. Sometimes you're getting very close to signal. You don't even know it's green or red. So there's poor sightline coming in. We also looked at a lot of the crash analysis. The crash analysis for the most recent period indicates crash patterns at this intersection. A lot of those were angle type collisions, which basically indicated that a lot of people are either lane changing or crossing the lane of traffic and kind of getting in contact with another vehicle that's trying to do the same operation, mainly because of the sightline concerns, the geometry of the intersection, and also because of congestion. So it's really overall a huge concern at this intersection. So we started to look at some pods, and there were there was a concept by the city that was developed early on. We kind of looked at that concept. So we are still in the process of evaluating it. We have not really come up with a geometry that would fit for this location. Concern is there's limited right of way. The intersection is pretty tight. There's the cemetery on the northwest corner. There's also properties that are built up. One of the thoughts was to convert down streets to one way because it serves the eastbound off ramp. That's being looked at. It does benefit in terms of overall operations of this intersection, but certainly creates some undue circulation on Smith Street and Clifton Street. So it's not a lot of traffic, but it is one of those things that we are evaluating. We're also looking at Main Street if that sightline condition could be improved. So again, we are looking at different ways of improving operations, and certainly adding lanes creates a much wider intersection, and also creates potential transitions that make Main Street much wider. So there's a kind of a ripple effect on making improvements in the intersection. So a lot of those things are being evaluated. We've had more discussions with the department's different units. And I don't know, Neil, if you want to speak a little bit more on the process moving forward on this one, or
Yeah, again, it's early on in terms of what we're trying to do is identify those needs and those deficiencies here. We've heard about this intersection in the past. And in terms of the process, we would initiate a project to start the design phase. So this would go through a typical design phase, and public outreach would be a part of it. I mean, even from the get-go, right? Before we even start really getting into some of the design details of various concepts. So that's something that you'd see early on in the process in terms of the project moving forward. So again, you wouldn't see something in construction here for a few years. We go through our normal design process. And again, we're looking right at the intent of some of these breakout projects was to provide some benefits within the corridor here that have what we call independent utility. Our process is still going to continue in terms of how to address congestion and mobility within the corridor. That process continues while these other projects can get implemented. There's a question.
any questions on this one?
Yeah, this is James from Danbury, James Root. What about at this intersection? To me, it's, I don't know, there's a congestion problem. Everyone's just wound up down there. I mean, what about possibly some traffic calming measures rather than making it an area that's more unfriendly to pedestrians?
So the volumes are quite substantial during the peak periods, and we are, as we're talking about, we are looking at different ways of trying to see what the best geometry would be at this intersection to allow for those peak periods when the traffic demand is higher. So we still think we're not going to be able to address the congestion problem completely. There's still going to be some congestion during those peak periods, and there's also, as we are looking at these intersections, we are looking at maybe even shortening those crosswalks if possible. Again, that's kind of a balance. We have to look at what's needed from the peak period standpoint, and then what's needed from a pedestrian crossing standpoint. So certainly, James, to your point, that's something that's being looked at to make it more pedestrian accessible. The concern is that trying to address capacity of this intersection in line with trying to make Main Street retain its cross section is going to be a delicate balance. So just because of the amount of traffic that's on Main and North, just because those two corridors, as many of you know, are kind of the main corridors into downtown. So I think all that is going to be part of that design phase that will be looked at to how to optimize or balance the pedestrian and the needs of the traffic during those peak periods.
Yeah, okay. I mean, it's just been my experience that when you widen the road, as you all probably know, even mitigation, associated mitigation, like, the new crosswalks and stuff, they really don't compensate. It's just a place that's I don't mean to sound too sentimental. It's just a place that's less really for people, for humans, and also the noise level goes up. It really is brutal on the community.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
All right, we have another, John, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, just a thought. What compounds the down street, the exit 5 into Down Street and then into Main and North Street? That section of North Street right there is very narrow. And the thought of making that wider to allow right turn off of Main Street, to allow down street flow into North Street a lot easier. If you made that street a little bit wider, it would ease up and make the traffic flow a little better, in my opinion. I think it's more of a bottleneck. It ends up being more of a funnel than allowing the flow of traffic.
Okay, good observation, John. Thank you.
Other thoughts, comments on this area? All right.
Okay, let's go to the interchange 8 improvement. So just to orient everyone on this interchange, this is interchange 8. So this is the easternmost interchange of our project limits. This is Route 6. The Route 6 piece comes off of 84 and then continues as Route 6 going. And this is a one-way road going eastbound. This is the target. Going westbound, you have to go on the other side of the highway, and that becomes the westbound and continues on to 84. Newtown Road, obviously, as many of you know, is a big commercial retail corridor. Newtown Road comes into this interchange area, and people who want to get to 84 westbound from Newtown Road would have to travel eastbound on Route 6, turn around, go westbound on Route 6, and then get on. So it kind of creates this complicated circuitous route and creates additional traffic that just is turning around here and going there. The other issue that we kind of see is this on-ramp on eastbound is located at a point where Old Sherman Road and Payne Road can't get access to it. People who come off these roads, they're quite substantial traffic, to 200 so cars here turning right in the peak period, have to again turn around and come in and get back on. So it creates that additional movement. And then we also looked at this traffic coming from 84 westbound. I know some of you have said that's not that enticing, but there's a lot of crossover traffic. As if you are coming in this area, there's a lot of crisscrossing traffic to the gas station, some people trying to get to 84 westbound, and some people continuing on to Newtown. So this westbound ramp sometimes creates those crossover traffic movements in this section. So we looked at this interchange to try to see what can be done relative to improving some of those operations. So the first thing I'll kind of end with the interchange layout, but the first thing we looked at is to move this eastbound ramp further to the east and allow for that traffic that is coming from here to be able to access it, which shifts this ramp from about 600 feet to the east to this on-ramp, and also looking at providing that access from the Target Drive to get on the eastbound ramp, which today doesn't exist. So that would allow traffic to get to 84 East sooner versus having to loop around and make that movement. The other thing we looked at is the 84 westbound that comes off here, to try to move that further to the west and come off of here opposite the gas station drives and the hotel drive, just to allow that traffic that's getting off, which is mostly trying to go to Newtown Road, to be staying on the left side and not having to be on the right side, which allows that crisscrossing or reduces that crisscrossing behavior where traffic would be getting off. If they were getting off here, they try to crisscross to go to the left to Newtown Road. So again, a small change, but looking at a way to put traffic closer to where they want to go. The last and the big one is this improvement at the interchange itself of Route 6, coming off of exit 8, going eastbound and going on westbound, is to try to prevent that Newtown Road traffic that I was mentioning to go around and come back on. And what we looked at is a new type of a design that is being done pretty much everywhere in the country called the diverging diamond. And the whole concept of the diverging diamond is to take the traffic on the right side and put it on the left side, which allows that traffic to then be able to make this movement without any kind of traffic light and signal. So basically, essentially shifts them to the left side to allow them to make a direct connection to 84 westbound. These people will not be controlled by a signal. The signal will control any traffic coming from the Route 6 westbound. In the same way, traffic coming from Newtown Road would be kind of on the left side of that and then switch over to the right. And the switchover is essentially controlled by a traffic signal. So the big benefit of that diverging diamond is we take away a significant amount of traffic that is turning around and making that move and putting them on this side where they can pretty much go unrestricted onto 84. So the idea here is to look at this as a potential improvement for this interchange. So that's kind of a relatively new concept in Connecticut. I know there's one other interchange that's being looked at as a diverging diamond, but it's kind of a new thought in Connecticut to do this kind of a layout. Any questions on that?
I don't see any, Sharat.
Okay. So before I turn it over to Krish, any questions that you guys have on any of the presentation material that we have? I know some of you had some great comments.
I guess I have a question, because when you were presenting the diverging diamond, I did see a few heads nod. And I want to know, and we didn't have any comments. So do people generally think that could be a good thing? Or you still need to look at it a little more? I'm
No,
interested
that
to
one's
hear.
gonna work. That one's
Yeah.
definitely gonna work. That's a great
Yeah,
idea.
I agree.
Okay.
I'm on board with this.
Okay,
Okay.
perfect. Any other comments, questions? Okay. Turn it over to
Okay.
Krish.
Thank you, Sharat. That's a lengthy presentation on a lot to digest, but we do appreciate everyone for all comments. We are definitely considering that in our future stakeholder meetings. So just to recap, there are three breakout projects that we discussed today. Two of them will be new to the Connecticut, which is the first one is the dynamic lane use. And Sharat mentioned that we reach out to different states, Michigan and Wisconsin. So with regards to technology, the outreach, we're definitely going to reach out to them, ask for their advices. And then as for DDI or Divergent Diamond, I appreciate that, two of the members of our pack likes this. And yes, both of them will have extensive outreach because these are new to the Connecticut. So just these three breakout projects are just among the breakout projects that we are recommending. So we are hoping to initiate these as early as this year. With regards to the website, I did mention earlier in the beginning that we have all 26 concepts up on our website. However, it doesn't have the process about the concept screening. So that's what the project team is trying to work and update our project website. So expect to have that update late this summer or maybe fall. With regards to the Pell report, I mentioned that the Pell report will include the process of how we screen the 26 concepts, the breakout projects. So that the draft Pell report should be completed by fall. That's just a draft. And then later this year to early next year, we're likely to hold a public information meeting. And that's for the next steps. And with that, I think we can open the floor for questions and discussions. Thank you.
All right. Is
Came
there
through from Danbury again. Hang on, sorry, this came through from Danbury. I just want to ask you all, this has to do with format. Is there a prospect of having an in-person meeting again?
for the pack or for the public?
I guess primarily for the pack, but I guess the public too. I guess I'm talking about the pack.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's always a possibility. I would say let's speak about the public. That would probably be an in-person meeting. for that public meeting. We've been pretty much going back to some in-person meetings for especially the larger public meetings. The PAC, yeah, we could, depending on what the schedule looks like for the next PAC meeting. Right now, we don't have anything scheduled, so it depends. As we get this report reviewed and start to roll out, we may want to have a PAC meeting prior to the publishing of the report. So that's something that we'll look at as we move forward.
Yeah, okay. I know it can be tricky. I mean, maybe a hybrid. I know that can be tricky, but.
So I guess, what I'm wondering is we always want to hear from our PAC members if you have a preference of one over the other.
I mean, I like them both. I mean, I see the usefulness of being in person because we have, I think, better conversations. We also have time before or after, and we can kind of pick your brains, the leadership, upper leadership, in this whole project to see what you're thinking. I mean, one of the things I've always enjoyed is trying to see on the side what your timeline expectations are that I don't go and share really to anyone, but it's just good for me to know, because these are all things that I think we should all be trying to focus on. I think we all focused on time, what it entails, and how much it costs. I think that's generally what we're kind of shooting for. And we have a lot of good, thoughts, ideas, and also proposals from, the leadership itself. But I think that when you're in person, you're just able to kind of pay more attention. But I mean, the online presentations have been great. I've really thought they were really interesting. So, I mean, I prefer both, but probably in person would be a little bit better.
All right, so, that's what we've been doing is both, we've been alternating, and as we move forward, we'll continue to keep that in mind. Because what you've said, we've noticed as well. And everyone likes the lunch.
Oh, yeah.
All right, other thoughts or questions? All right, well, obviously you have Sherrod's information, you have the project team's information. Feel free to reach out if you have any follow-up questions. The presentation is online, the video will be up, and then as we work on the meeting summary, we'll let you know when that is up as well. So thank you very much. We appreciate your time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for including
Thank you.
us.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Likewise.